The Northwest Territories, vast, distinctive, remote, as varied as the 55,000 people who call it home. Scattered across 1/3 of Canada's landmass, Northerners are independent and proud of their old and new traditions. The fascinating political history of the North is the story of a struggle towards self-government, which has led to the creation of the Legislative Assembly and continues still. Northern heritage is reflected in every aspect of the Assembly. Past, present, and future meet in this alliance of cultures. To understand current realities, we must look into the past. For thousands of years, the only people who inhabited the Northwest Territories were the Inuit, who lived above the tree line and along the Arctic coast, and the Dene, who occupied the Mackenzie River region in the west. While Vikings are believed to have been in the Arctic about 1,000 years ago, few Europeans visited the Northwest Territories until much later. In the late 1600s, Britain granted ownership of Rupert's Land to the Hudson's Bay Company. This important event marked the beginning of a period of prosperous trade and exploration. It drew Europeans into the north and native people to the trading posts and villages along the Mackenzie River. In 1867, the year of Confederation, Canada was but a fraction of present-day Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. The rest of what we know as modern-day Canada was either Rupert's Land or the area including the prairies in the Northwestern Territory. Within 3 years, these regions also joined the Dominion of Canada. The Northwest Territories Act of 1875 provided for a lieutenant governor and an appointed territorial council based in Ottawa. Less than a decade later, the Northwest Territories had an elected 22-member Legislative Assembly, but this state of affairs would not last. After the Yukon and the Prairie Provinces separated from the Northwest Territories, the boundaries were redrawn as they are today. The territories reverted back to colony status because of diminished influence. Disinterested politicians in Ottawa rarely visited the North and didn't understand enough to properly defend it. Meanwhile, newcomers continued to trickle into the North, attracted by its rich resources such as oil at Norman Wells and gold in Yellowknife. The population growth from a mining boom in Yellowknife led to the establishment of the first municipal government in 1940. A few years later, the first resident of the Northwest Territories was appointed to the Territorial Council in Ottawa. Inuit and Dene were given a voice in politics when they were allowed to vote in the early 50s. This breakthrough brought about rapid changes. Elected members replaced appointees, eligible districts multiplied, and the North played host to some council sessions. The 60s were a decade of political consciousness, and the Northwest Territories made headway in its quest for self-determination. Ottawa acted on recommendations from the Carruthers Commission, which traveled across the North talking to residents. Their feedback resulted in the government and its administration being moved from Ottawa to Yellowknife in 1966. That same year, Simone Michael, an Inuk, became the first Native person elected to the Territorial Council. The challenge of the 1970s was to turn dreams into reality. The spirit and energy of the Aboriginal people was contagious, and soon the first fully elected council of Northern residents took office. This historic 1975 event was the cornerstone of today's Legislative Assembly. With 15 elected members from which a speaker and 2 executive members were chosen, the transition to representative government was well underway. Despite this progress, the commissioner still retained authority as leader of the executive. During the 80s, both the number and responsibility of the elected members increased. By the 11th Assembly in 1987, the legislature had grown to its present 24 members. From their ranks, they chose 8 ministers, including a government leader, replacing the commissioner as head of the Executive Council. Today, the executive branch is similar to a provincial cabinet. The government leader resembles a provincial premier, while the role of the federally appointed commissioner has become mostly ceremonial, like that of a provincial lieutenant governor. The Legislative Assembly may be parallel to provincial governments in structure, but its powers are more restricted. In practical terms, the Legislative Assembly decides how public money is spent, passes laws, and approves policies and programs. In the span of one generation, local authority has increased tenfold. Yet major decisions about land claims and control of resources are still in the hands of federal officials. The Northwest Territorial Government combines the best elements of Native tradition. The cultural emphasis on cooperation has discouraged political parties in favor of independent candidates who work collectively to pass legislation, often referred to as consensus government. In this unique forum, individual members choose the Executive Council on the basis of candidates' qualifications, not political affiliations. This type of cooperative government makes it necessary for members to represent the concerns of their own constituents while considering the welfare of all communities in the Northwest Territories. At the same time, the Executive Council does not have absolute authority, but must seek consensus of members on all matters of importance to the government. Several other aspects of daily operations distinguish the Legislative Assembly from its provincial counterparts. The Assembly follows standard parliamentary rules for debate. However, proceedings are simultaneously translated into English, French, and 7 Aboriginal languages. Flexibility is a characteristic of Northerners, and it shows in the legislature's willingness to bring government to the people by holding sessions in various locations across the North. But the completion of a permanent legislative building in Yellowknife, set for 1993, may bring an end to the Assembly's nomadic era. The mace, a traditional parliamentary symbol, is uniquely decorated with materials from across the North and reflects the history and culture of its Aboriginal people. Today's Legislative Assembly tackles complex, contentious issues on a regular basis. Land claims are a top priority in the pursuit of self-government. The settlement of 3 major claims by Inuit, NWT, and Inuit will mean recognition of Aboriginal people's role in shaping the social and economic decisions affecting them. The question of dividing the Northwest Territories into separate Eastern and Western Territories was introduced in the 60s and persists today. Whether or not division takes place in the years ahead, self-determination will remain the most important objective for all people of the Northwest Territories. It could mean moving toward eventual provincehood and the greater autonomy and decision-making that it would bring. It's amazing to think that in less than 30 years, the Northwest Territories has evolved from a colony into a dynamic political system. Today's Legislative Assembly is in a constant state of transition with a full political agenda. Each time it meets, new challenges are met and history is made. Our legislators are committed to maintaining cultural values and traditions while progressing with the times. Today's Legislative Assembly is a mature, capable government, bringing effective representation to the many people and cultures scattered across this fascinating land.